Hi, let us have a quick understanding on continuous integration with Jenkins. Jenkins plays an important role in continuous integration and automation. It's going to facilitate the continuous integration and it is extensible and open source. And a very important feature of it can automatically trigger the build test of any workflow or any software automatically as well as and when the code gets changed. It's going to regularly monitor the status of the project, and based on the trigger that we have configured, whenever there is a code change, automatically it can trigger the build and test the software automatically using the unit testing scripts and report the errors. So that's going to facilitate the development team to capture the errors or defect in the earlier stage. It's very easy to extend. There are hundreds of plugins available where it can integrate with n number of unit testing packages, source control systems, as well as the other DevOps infrastructure. And it's going to bring in the standards and uniformity across the projects within any organization. Let's see a small workflow how Jenkins works. I'll be having Jenkins running in a separate server where I can configure the details like the authentications, different type of projects, where the source code is located, and I can configure a number of workflow. Jenkins can be downloaded from this particular website. Already I have downloaded. This is available for various platforms like Linux, Mac, OS, Windows. Already I have installed in my laptop. After installation, this is how it looks like. I can create a number of projects. Already I have created a project. I have named it as App2. So all I need is what type of project I wanted and what's the name of it I can create. There are different type of projects available. I have created a freestyle project. I'm not going to get into the administration as well as how to do the setup. I'm just going to give a small demo on how things works. I have an application with the name App2. Like this, I can integrate all the applications that is available, that is getting developed as well as getting deployed into the production, into the Jenkins environment, and I can control. So now I have an App2. So what this particular application does, so I can have the configurations in terms of from where it's going to get the source code. So I have configured the source code. It is available in my Git repository. So this is the sample application provided by the Jenkins itself. I have forked it into my GitHub repository and I have provided that specific URL. And what is the trigger? So I'm going to have a webhook in the sense. So this is my project that I have forked. Let me get into the repository. So this is the project that I have forked. So within the project, I can maintain the source code, whatever the code that I wanted to check in or the code that I wanted to change, I'll be changing it over here. Within the settings, I have put in a webhook. So webhook, what it does, whenever there is a change in the source code, it's going to call this particular webhook. And since it is not available over the internet, I couldn't provide the DNS. In case if it is available over the internet and if I have a DNS or a public IP address for my Jenkins server, I can provide it over here. Automatically it does work. So automatically the change would get triggered as an event into my Jenkins server. So within my Jenkins server, automatically the build would get triggered. But since I don't have a public IP address, what I have done, I have made the Jenkins to check with the GitHub, is there any change every 2 minutes. So what it does, every 2 minutes, it's going to check whether it is available. And I'm going to use a tool called Marvin to do the build activity. So once the entire setup on where the code is located, how to do the build, what tool to use, where the output should get stored, once if I have configured all this, the build process can be triggered. Either I can trigger it manually saying build now, or let me make a small code change. So I'm going to open the source code. Let me edit. I'm editing and commit the changes. So once the change is committed, next time whenever the Jenkins looks for the change, whether change happened or not, automatically the build would get triggered. So within 2 minutes, a build should get triggered and it should pull the latest code from the GitHub, do the build activity, and if there are any errors, it's going to report. Otherwise, it's going to give a message saying the project build is successful. Yes. The next build is triggered because when it is checking with the GitHub repository, there was a code change. It checks out the changes and it triggers a build activity. So what needs to be built And what are all the libraries to be included? That comes from the POM file, which is available as a part of the repository. So it's going to compile whatever the code that I have. It's going to generate the application that I have configured as a part of the POM file. Test run went through fine. So 2 test run and there are no failures. So it will continue with the build and it's going to get me the jar file as an output. So I do have the output stored in this specific location. So within the repository, the POM file will define what are all the activities that should happen and what dependency, saying like I'm going to trigger the JUnit. So that's a dependency, and I'm going to do the build. What is the class that I wanted to do the build? What are all the libraries that I should include? So all the definition would be available as a part of the POM file. That's called project object model that will be used by the build tool called Marvin. So in a summary, Marvin can automate the entire process of development as well as deploying the code into the production. Even Jenkins can push the developed code or the built code into the production environment automatically, and that's where the DevOps comes into picture. So we should be in a position to bring in a standard as well as a controlled way of deploying the code into the production environment as quick as possible. So overall, the Jenkins workflow, this is how it works like. Whenever there is a change in the source control system, the repository would be identified saying there was a code change and the workflow would get triggered. And that's going to collect all the dependent repositories or the libraries, and the build activity would get started. As a part of the build activity, the individual modules would get built and the test activity will get triggered. All the modules, the individual unit testing scripts would get executed. If all the results are successful, then it will move on to the deployment stage where the code would get deployed into the production environment or whatever the environment that workflow is defined to get deployed. The entire application would get deployed into that particular environment. And this is where the Docker and Kubernetes plays an important role, where dynamically I should be in a position to get the infrastructure and get the code deployed and make it available either for testing or for the production release as quick as possible. So Jenkins going to connect the development and the production deployment, and it plays a very significant role in the continuous integration.